welcome tonight. We're so grateful that you all have taken your time out tonight to come and share with us in this very important conversation. I'm thankful for Mayor Tuck for accepting the invitation to come and to spend some time and to share with each one of us what's happening around us, but also to be able to hear the questions and the concerns that you may have from your heart and also from your respective locations and spheres of influence that you are in. It's a good thing to see so many people of different age groups, amen. It's not just us old folk, amen. Or some of us who want to be old, amen. But housekeeping, the restroom is through the door to the right. If you go to the door to your right over there, the women's restroom is to the left. Once you get in the door, the men's is to the right. If we have to evacuate for any issue at all, the side exit door right here, and the front exit door right there. If we go out the front door, we're going to meet across the street in an open field. If we go out the side door, we're going to meet the far end of the parking lot. That's the whole railroad training, amen. So hopefully, prayerfully, all your questions will be asked and answered tonight, and we'll leave here tonight with some understanding and some clarity as to what's going on around us and all that good stuff. So with no further ado, there's a 90-minute time limit, right? To 8:30, 8:15? Okay. No, we can't say that because the NBA is midnight. Hey, someone's going to be working in the morning. Amen. But we're going to try to answer all your questions until you're satisfied. Good enough? All right, I'm going to now turn it over to Mayor Tuck. Amen.
Good evening, and thank you, Pastor Kenny, and to the congregation for opening up your doors. I believe in starting on time, so he gave me like a pre-5-minute warm-up. So because we said we'll start at 7, I'm going to wait another few minutes, but during that time, I will take the time to at least introduce some of the people, or acknowledge some of the people who are here from the city, from our city council, Vice Mayor Jimmy Gray. We have Councilwoman Hope Harper. Now, because we have more than 2 council members, and this is not, I noticed we have publicity about it, but they won't be saying anything. All right, so be aware, individuals, if you think they should be commenting, they won't. This is my town. All due respect, I thank you for coming. We have our city manager, Mary Bunting, who's back over here. We have back in the far corner our communication strategist, Robin McCormick. I see getting ready to sign in Councilman Chris Bowman, and we have our Captain Edmonds over here from Hampton PD. Trying to think who else I see who might be here for this. Yeah, there is. He's in the back, and he comes in like that. But Chief Talbot is here as well. And so what we generally do is that if we find there are a number of questions related to crime or issues related to community public safety, then we'll give Chief Talbot an opportunity just to talk to you and tell you what we're doing in order to try and tamp that down. We also have another city staffer, Brian Casey, who's back in the back, who's also assisting with some of the sign-ups.
And while I'm on the way, if anybody has a question, we're going to ask you raise your hand, and I'll get you a mic that way you can ask your question. Everybody can hear you when you ask.
Well, sir, let me give you a ground rule. I have a mic. And when you raise your hand, I'll come to you.
Oh, okay.
It's a long story, but it's the best way of managing expectations. One of the things we have as a ground rule is that we will be treat each other with dignity and respect, and that I try and make sure that everybody has a chance to ask a question before I come back around. So sometimes they say, well, I have a follow-up. Well, hold on to your follow-up. We've got to go around and make sure everybody gets an opportunity. I told him when I told him about our arrangements, typically we go about an hour 15 to an hour and a half. Sometimes we stay longer, and we feel like, again, all questions have been answered. We end before an hour and a half or whatever time it is. We want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with responsive guidance. So I now have 7 o'clock. I will share with you, last Tuesday I did town hall with a group. And I typically start off just talking about some of the things that are going on in the city. And it seemed like it was the wrong thing to say in that environment, at least from one individual. And all I say is that we are one community. We're one community. And whether or not you feel that a particular community is getting more of something, another community is getting less of something, I personally have tried to avoid that sense as mayor. In fact, when I ran back in 2016, one of the things I talked about doing was trying to make the pie bigger. Because sometimes there is a sense of competition among neighborhoods. And the strangest thing was, back in 2015, our city manager was hosting a meeting with individuals from the Little England area, and it was over Bridge Street. And what would be done, whether or not it would be one way, whether or not it would be a pedestrian bridge, whether they would build the bridge, and some other things. And I remember one specific comment made by someone who said, if we were Salt Lodge, you wouldn't be treating us that way. And so many of you think that the area over Little England, which we call Old Money Hampton, gets probably more than its share of things. And here it was, this community comparing itself to another community. And one of the things I believe is that we're all one community, and what we need to try and do is make sure that the pie is big enough for everybody to be able to feel like I got something out of it. And so that's just one of the things I think hurts the community, when people feel they're in competition. Last year we talked about a mission, and many of you are aware that we have this traffic problem through our city. In the morning, if you're going through downtown, trying to get to downtown through Phoebus, but more particularly in the afternoon, between 3 and 6, and that's when the number of cars that are going through our downtown and through Phoebus goes from about 500 cars per hour up until about 800 cars per hour. And most of those vehicles are coming off the interstate. They don't originate here in Hampton, although we have a disagreement with VDOT over where that traffic originates. So what we talked about doing was, at that time, was cutting off the access to the interstate at Settlers Lane Road down near Hampton University, and also cutting it off through Phoebus at Mallory Street. And what we got was, oh, you're making things better for the folks who live in downtown, but you're making it worse for people who live in other parts of the city. That was not our intent. But the fact of it is bad for almost anybody who's even trying to get from downtown home. People were trying to get to businesses, cleaners, the food line, the shopping centers in Phoebus. You can't do it. And my experience last June was the side streets were all backed up to the point that it became a safety issue, because you've got a fire station there and folks are blocking the access or the egress from the fire station. So if they had emergency, they have a difficult time. So one of the things we've done, we started it back in, actually I think it might have been April time frame, was that between 3 and 6 o'clock, you cannot go across the bridge in Phoebus. You can't go across that bridge to make a left turn to go to 64 East. Now, initially we had a concern expressed by Hampton University and by the VA Medical Center. But now the way we have it structured, people who work at Hampton University, people who work at the VA Medical Center, they have almost a private access road to the interstate going east. Our challenges now are at Settlers Landing Road near Hampton University. And we asked VDOT, first VDOT actually did an analysis about the traffic. And what they said was, if we block off the access through Hampton between 3 and 6 o'clock, the traffic on the interstate would back up to Jefferson Avenue. That's how much traffic is getting off the interstate and coming through our town. Now, sometime between maybe, I would say April and July, VDOT, as part of the expansion that they're doing at the Hampton Bridge Tunnel, they're going to create 4 lanes of traffic that will go all the way from up to Jefferson Avenue. It will go all the way through Hampton, through the tunnel, and come out on the other side and go off that. 2 lanes will be express lanes, which you will pay to utilize those if you want to move faster. And 2 lanes will be general purpose lanes that will be free to travel. Do I believe it'll work? I don't know, but in all their modeling, their belief is that people who want to get to the south side, I guess in an efficient amount of time, will be willing to pay, and it won't break the bank, but it will be a rate that will incentivize people to get out of the general purpose lanes and get into the express lanes, and consequently, traffic in those general purpose lanes will move faster. I don't know. I've seen it in Northern Virginia where you've got a few cars that are traveling express lanes, and you've got 4 lanes of traffic in the general purpose lanes that are really moving at cruise speed, more or less about 20 miles per hour. But what's going to happen, and I sort of say this, is that somewhere between maybe April and July, they're going to close off one of those 3 lanes that goes from roughly, I guess, LaSalle, all the way through to down at Hampton University, because they have to rebuild the 2 bridges across the Hampton River. They're not wide enough to carry the expected volume of traffic that will happen when they create those 4 lanes that are going east and the 4 lanes coming back west. So, will that traffic go in that 1 lane side there? They'll be getting off the interstate and coming through our city. And so one of the things we're looking at trying to do will be to have a no right turn on red that'll be down at the shopping center at Hampton University. It's a complicated way of trying to explain it, but you know, currently we have 1 lane that goes directly to Hampton University. You have that center lane that allows you to either go to the ramp or go straight on Woodland. Then you have the inside lane that takes you straight on Woodland. We're going to try and use red light cameras, and we'll say there will be a red arrow that will not allow you to make that right turn movement. And if you do, there will be a camera that will take a picture of you making that right turn movement. I shouldn't say you, because you're a law-abiding citizen. So the people who will be going that way, breaking the law, they will take a picture of them as they make that turn. There will be a camera that will take a picture of the license plate of that vehicle, the rear license plate, and there will be another camera position that will take a picture of that vehicle actually going up the ramp. The way that we were able to get, well, it's a different issue, but it's still red light cameras. But anyway, there will be a company that will be responsible for monitoring those movements and those tickets, and anybody who makes that kind of movement will receive a $50 ticket. There won't be any points in your driver's license, but the idea is to try and stop that. And that will be in place up until the time that the bridge tunnel expansion is completed and those 4 lanes going eastbound are taken care of. It's not intended to be a moneymaker for us. The idea is that we want to try and get compliance. Now, this is for you. So I will start now with asking questions. So show your hand, and I'll come to you, and we'll start the town hall. Yes, just a moment. Pastor King, so you understand, the first time I did this was back in, I think, September of 2016. And there was one gentleman who really had a bone to pick with some other folks from the meeting. And I gave him the mic and wouldn't give it back. So, okay?
That's why I don't give it up on Sunday.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Pamela McCray, and I am a resident of Hampton, Virginia. And I have here my 22-year-old son, who was born in Hampton. And I'm just really excited to be here because it's not often you get to go to the dentist and see your mayor. So he did. I felt like I'm personally invited. But we had a nice opportunity to talk. And my question and concern is, I'm wondering about my city of Hampton. I've lived here for almost 30 years. I've seen change, I've seen growth, I've seen development, and then I've seen some concerns. Will Hampton continue to blossom, or will it dry up like a raisin in the sun? And I ask that because my oldest son has officially moved to Richmond, Virginia, because he said Hampton is boring. My youngest son here, I'm really looking for him to stay and be the future Hampton. What plans are there for our future Hamptonians?
That's a great question. One of the challenges that we are having, and actually the region, but more so Hampton, is retaining young people. And we had an economist make a presentation was a Coliseum Central Business Improvement District annual meeting this morning. And he talked about there are three drivers of our economy in this region. One is the military, two is the Port of Virginia, and three is tourism. Well, if you're talking about really a young person who's a college graduate, if you're talking about Hampton University, you're talking about a $60,000 investment, I believe. So what you want to do, but the idea is that your first thinking is, I want to make some money. And then also, you want to go someplace where other young people are congregating and you can have a lot of fun. What I shared with you this morning, and I'll share with others, you can live in Hampton and you can make a good living. Within our region, there are other places for young people as far as entertainment. But also believe that once you get past that point of every Friday or Saturday night, and I did that once upon a time, you want to go to the club and dance and party on. When you get to a point where you want to settle down, marry, raise a family, your values change and you're looking for a different type of lifestyle. And you're looking for something that offers a good quality of life, that's a safe community, that has all the, a good place for education for your child to grow up. And so, whereas you may not choose Hampton now, I believe that it will still be a place that you will come to. Now, it's not saying that young people don't stay here. We are attracting young people. We have things we're trying to do, but they're somewhat limited. We're never going to be at Virginia Beach. We probably won't have the same nightlife that Norfolk offers. But again, there are opportunities here, and with what's coming with respect to wind energy, we've got a representative from Dominion Energy on the back row. Wind energy is going to change our region because it's going to change the types of jobs and opportunities that are available. And I think what you'll also find is less of an emphasis on necessarily having to have a four-year degree. If you can come out of one of our academies with certifications, you'll find a job in our region starting off probably about $35,000 or more. And if you also have training in the trades, you'll also be able to I think, make a good living. One of the things that I think the Vice Premier talks about periodically is that of about 30% of the people who live in the cities around here work in another city. So again, when I was in college, there wasn't that much going on in Durham, but we could go to Greensboro for entertainment. Never went to Richmond, but Raleigh had entertainment, and Greensboro's like about maybe 70 miles away from Durham. So there are opportunities, I think, for things to provide a nice nightlife and activities for young adults. But again, when you get to that point where you're looking for a different type, your values change, I think Hampton's a great place for you. And we're trying to make sure that it's that kind of place. I think one of the great things is that we're easy to get around, and we're a safe community. I know we have some problems with crime, but as I share, most of the times, those individuals are known to each other, the victim and the perpetrator. And if you're not involved in generally illegal activities or in activities that take you into less than safe areas, that you're safe in Hampton. Yes, sir. And you don't have to give your name.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bob Smith. Actually, I have two questions.
Only one.
One question.
We can come back.
First question. In reference to the state school project, one of the things that the contractors discussed was the number of jobs that would be offered once everything was fixed. My question is, what's the possibility of posting those jobs now so that if there are certain requirements that are needed, people have time to try to get prepared? If there are educational requirements or experience that's needed, they know those things going up front and then prepare themselves for it now. And that's it.
Well, no, I understand the question. It's a perfectly good question. Except right now, I don't think they know who the tenants are going to be. And so that's going to be one of the challenges of posting those positions now, is that you know who the tenants are going to be. But I think as we get closer to the time, and I think we're looking at maybe a 2-year window, probably before everything is constructed and they're ready to start doing things they've got, their people. And in fact, what we can try and do is to get them to announce as soon as they know who the businesses are, to try and get those announcements out so we can try and prepare people through workforce development. Yes, just one minute.
My name's Ari Rubin. How old is he? I am coming to you today because I lived in Hampton for close to 10 years now, and I've seen change also, particularly in one instance. I skateboard, and what you said about young people coming to Hampton really resonates with me because I prefer to do my skateboarding in the beautiful city of Hampton where I live. But the issue that I find is that I've seen the city spend money at Woodland Skate Park, putting up fences, adding little picnic benches, resurfacing the concrete on the parking lot, while the skate park is completely fallen into disrepair, and they've done really nothing for the people that actually use the park, just to make it look nicer for the people that drive by. So does the city have any plans on, you talk about helping young people? Do you have any plans on making the city more interesting for young people? Or is it just talk?
No, valid question too. And actually, the city manager received an email to meet with the, okay, all right. Well, it's a loaded question. But yeah, she's going to make arrangements to meet with you. Okay, all right. So everyone will know that the meeting is scheduled. Since you called me out, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying that the meeting is already scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 5 with our Parks Director, so we can hear from the young people what they particularly like to see.
Well, let me also offer that last year I did town halls. I did 4 town halls with students from our 4 high schools plus our 7 middle schools, and I hope it was 7. But anyway, and the idea was to find out several questions. One, how do you feel about growing up in Hampton? Do you feel safe in the city? Do you feel safe in your school environment? What are the things you think would make Hampton a better place to grow up in? And another part was that what are the things that we need to do that would make you want to come back to Hampton, say if you went away to college or whatever. And one of the things we think about is that a lot of young people want to talk about, we want to offer them basketball or football, but the interests are varied. So we have some individuals who are interested in video games. You have individuals who want to do chess. You have individuals who want to do the arts. So what we've tried to do is to expand our offerings at our community centers. So now we actually have, I think, video equipment that's going to have game rooms and other kinds of things. And again, the city manager can expound on that. But we recognize again that interests are varied, and we want to try and keep our young people engaged. One of the things I shared earlier today was that when I was growing up, we had a Presbyterian church that had a student center. And they would open up, particularly in the summertime, and somewhat the school year. You go in and you play pool. They had a jukebox. I'm trying to think what else they offered. And I was in junior high going and doing this, particularly during the day, because I didn't think else to do in the summertime. And then actually there was an Episcopal church that did pretty much the same thing. And on Friday nights, this again, Presbyterian church would have skate parties. I think I did it one time. I fell too many times on my rear, and I said, it's not for me. But those are possibilities. We look at what some of our churches have. Can they also? They are assets in communities. Is a possibility that they could also do things that would draw some young people, create nice, safe spaces for young people. And I think it's a partnership. It's our saying, okay, we want to make sure that our children have safe spaces. And we know the city can't do it all. Yes, we have community centers. We're trying to work with nonprofits. But are there other ways that we can do things? I think it was last summer. This was 2022. After hearing about those students saying, hey, we'd like to have video games, our Parks and Recreation Department worked with a private gamer, a contractor who would go into neighborhoods and would do pop-up events with these, he had a gaming vehicle he pulled behind him, so you can stand outside and play video games, or you can go inside an air-conditioned area and play. So those type of things that, we want, again, our young people to feel like we are interested in them, that we are invested in them, and we want to know your ideas. So the fact that our city manager is being responsive to your concern about that skate park, and there's other things that, if you have a concern about, we want to know those things. As council members, we want to know.
if staying in Hampton is a good idea, although I've made a wonderful life here. I'm afraid, especially, I'm home at 9:30 every night, but he's not, and I'm worried for my kid about the Island Islands.
And that is a valid concern, and I will share with you that it's not just Hampton. In fact, last April 2022, was the first time we did it. Going back to 2016, I believe, we've had this regional convening with a national organization called Cities United that formed back in 2011. And the reason they formed was they found that every 24 hours, 14 black males between the ages of 14 and 24 were losing their lives to homicide. And so they started with the goal of reducing that number by 50% by 2025. I think it was 2 years ago, we were at a national convening in, I think it was 2019. They announced that the number had been reduced by 2. So that meant that I think 350 lives have been saved at least in that year. It's a slow process, but in April 2022, I brought the other 6 mayors of our region together to talk about it because everybody's experiencing it. Virginia Beach, which is normally rated in the top 3 cities in the nation with a population of 500,000 people or more, was always rated among the top 3 safest cities in the country. And yet, I think it was February of 2022, Virginia Beach had the shootings at the oceanfront and some other shootings, and you still regularly hear about it. Same with Chesapeake. So no one's immune, and I understand your concerns, and we are doing a number of things. We guys are chief to talk about some of the things we're doing. I will tell you that the month of January was an anomaly with the 20 shootings in 1 month and the 9 homicides. That's not normal. February was a better number, and again, he can share that with you. But I think it's a safe city. And I'm concerned about you because one of the 3 things I ran on was trying to make sure that our city was safer. Because if people don't feel safe, they're not out doing meetings like this, they're not out shopping. There's a lot of things that are negative, that aren't positive for a city, I should say, and it's when people don't feel safe. And the thing is, we like to feel like people can come here and move about. It's interesting because we have people who come here for outside events, who come here for conventions and conferences and Blue Williams tournaments and things like that. And I've never heard anybody come and say, when I was in your city, I didn't feel safe. But again, we're here and we have a different perspective on it. As I shared earlier, the people who are generally engaged in that know each other. And when there's a shooting incident, we get emails, council members get emails. And what I was typically saying is that there was a shooting in such and such place. They arrived, and maybe, in some instances, the person went to the hospital on his or her own, and that the person is uncooperative. And that's the biggest challenge that we have. People don't want to assist us in trying to find out, who the bad people are. Also now, we are engaged with Johns Hopkins University, we're engaged with Harvard University, we're engaged with Cities United to try and come up with best practices and things we can implement to try and reduce that level. And what we've determined is that there are about 59 actors in our city who are the ones who are most at risk of either being victims or being the perpetrator. And we are trying to focus our efforts and energies on those 59 with a number of different strategies. Now, I think there's some hand here. We'll come over to you, sir. Just a minute. Well, since he's right there, we'll reach across here.
Good evening. I'm Ursula Borges, and I appreciate you saying that you want to have a pie that serves everyone. And hopefully we in our RIF area there, especially neighbors of the 750 Shell Road property, former school for the deaf and blind, will not simply get the crumbs of the crust only. I've written to you and to your city council recently about the wildlife back there that is losing its natural habitat. I appreciate very quickly you guys responding to me, and really thank you for that. One mention you made was that the developers, they could simply remove everything. unless there's some kind of endangered species back there. And so they're in their right to clear the trees as they see fit and as it was scheduled. Also, you mentioned naturally wildlife migrates to a new habitat. Now, I am concerned about wildlife, which is also coming out now regularly to our neighborhood. They're going to walk in the streets, everything. I'm also concerned about us human beings because the noise is now so loud coming from the old Aberdeen Road traffic from 664 at nighttime. I often sleep with my earplugs in now, and I'm wondering, are we expected to also naturally migrate somewhere else when our environment is no longer habitable and really, just appropriate for someone who pays taxes, who worked all their life, who was a productive, decent citizen, who is doing everything to decrease crime and have a positive impact on the city? Because I tell you, I have several real estate agents looking at properties for us, but in order to get something even comparable that we have built up over the last 37 years there, I get something for $350,000 with no curb appeal, with nothing. It's disgusting how it's overpriced. So I want to know, what is the city going to do for us? We were told that our infrastructure around the school property would be improved, street-wise and everything else. I don't see anything happening in that regard. I think everything is being in place now to improve access and to make it happen for the trailers to come in 24/7. I've seen that the trees were cleared directly, exactly to the fences of the neighbors in most instances. And that is, simply putting up a little brick wall is not going to reduce the noise at all. And not even to talk about the environmental impacts to our properties. Some specialists in that area have already cautioned us of water runoff. And I know during previous meetings, city council meetings, all that was addressed, and we were assured that there would be just some drainage basins and all put in place. What we're hearing from professionals is really, it's not going to stop. We will have major water issues coming into our properties. And also, I would like to really, for the city to address these concerns, and really valid concerns, Mayor Tuck, and that we really see what is going to be done now. Because what we see now is that natural barrier of woods that was supposed to stay in place, that has already evaporated. That is not the case any longer. And so if that promise is already not being kept, what else are we to expect? So I hope that the city will really just lay out a concrete plan and show us really indeed what you guys are doing in order for us to be able to stay in place where we raised our children, where they are successful now. They moved away, and I tell you honestly, my daughter is not considering coming here. She wants us to keep the house because she's, Mama, I grew up there. I have the most fondest memories. I want you to stay, or if you go somewhere else, keep the house focused so we can come back. So, thank you for listening. I know I ramble a lot, but maybe that's because I speak this as a second language. But thank you.
No, those are all valid concerns, and I will share with you. What you're witnessing right now is phase one. It is the clearing of the land there, but there's been no construction. And so the perception may be that they're only doing this clearing for the trucks. But we have an agreement with them, and we're going to hold them to that agreement. Now, trees will be planted, and you're right, it won't replace the trees that are removed, but the idea is that there will be buffering that will shield that neighborhood from the sound. In terms of whether or not people choose to come back to Hampton, I can share with you that I know of a number of neighborhoods where people lived in that house, they raised their families in that house, and the children moved away. And they didn't come back. And the person who lived in that house, the parent, deceased, transitioned, whatever, And the children sold that house. That's why you have so many rental houses in some of these neighborhoods, is that the children, we had a house in Chapel Hill we grew up in. We built a house, took us 2 years to build it, recycled lumber, concrete, built it in 1966. My mother died in 85, my father died in 92. My brother and sister lived in Durham, another brother lived in Charlotte, I lived up here. We rented the house for maybe 2 years and we sold it. That happens. We'd love for everybody who's grown up here to come back here and want to stay here, but that doesn't happen. We are one of the more transient areas. It happens. It happens because you have a military who come here and some decide to stay here. You have individuals, again, who grew up here, they go away. Some come back, but others, if they have a homestead, they sell it. And you're talking about quality of life, and one of the things I said when I voted, I would not have voted for anything that I would believe would reduce your quality of life. I live near Langley Air Force Base. It's not to make a comparison against what you experience, but I have jets that fly over our house. We chose to live there. You chose to live where you are, but you'd expect the change. But the change is happening, and we're trying our best. We'll do our best to ensure that your quality of life does not diminish appreciably. And that's all I can promise you this evening. Yes, sir.
Using your exact words and what you said in the exact time with the interstate, when the debate was that about the residents going back and forth about them not wanting to happen, and we told you all exactly what we knew would happen with the traffic, the same thing that VDOT says. Your exact words, your exact roundabout words were that even though the people that came out were not all Hampton citizens, you did not really, I don't want to say they didn't care, but you need to take the Hampton citizens' opinion more than those people at that time for that incident. Go on to the 750 Shuttle Road incidents. I came to you specifically, came to you all specifically for over 6 months. There is a deep, deep, deep distrust in this council and this city right now, in this area, for this exact reason. Because we listened to a councilman tell us that nobody said anything, even though we heard it. We have a councilman that is the president of a board on that exact, of the 200 men that you use in your example as a reason why you wanted to approve this thing. The councilman is the president of the board that he is a director on. And another member is also, he's also on that board as well too, of a great organization. There's a deep distrust because these kind of things, we told you all, and citizens came out. We had a council member say that he did his math with the people that came out. The people that were for the project were not from the city, were not citizens. They were not. So, and you all have the documentation that proves the addresses when we signed up at city council. So there's a deep distrust, and my question is this. How are you all going to rebuild this? Because you said that you want every piece of the pie, you don't want us in competition. But when there's sections that are not receiving funds, resources, or anything that other sections of the city are, that's what causes this. We see council people telling us that we're not people. This is a deep distrust here that needs to be fixed and amended. And you all didn't say anything in reference to that. You all don't go against your own in terms of you didn't correct this council person. Truly, honestly, we want to see something significant. You all have really changed our lives, as Ms. Ursula said, by voting for this, even though none of the residents of the city of Hampton, Virginia, who pay our taxes here, said we did not want. You all had the person on that board come and hire people to come and promote this and say this. So that another council person can say, oh, well, it seemed like it was even towards the side, when it wasn't. How are you all going to rebuild this and fix this? It's neighborhood specific, I'm speaking for this neighborhood right now specifically, but this view in the city now that we have, because we do have violence, but now we have seen what council thinks when people come out and speak to you all consistently. Thank you.
First of all, I want to correct something. In the 12 and a half years I've been on council, I will never be so aloof as to tell you that one person's perspective doesn't count versus another person's perspective. And so your statement, all due respect, about me saying that I value the people who came, who were not residents of whatever, over yours was not correct. I just don't make those kind of statements. We can find it, okay? But I can tell you, I'm consistent wherever I go in terms of what I say. I don't say something in one community, and I won't say it in another community, okay? Now, you asked about a number of things in terms of what other council members say. I don't try and govern what other people say, okay? Leave it at that. With respect to trying to make the pie bigger, one of the things we try to do with the city manager is say, look, we know there are neighborhoods that don't have curb and gutter. You probably won't get curb and gutter because of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act as well as other environmental concerns. But what I've said to do is let's go block by block and see if we make improvements. It might be that you get what's called a swell, but we're trying to make those improvements. We're trying to make lighting improvements. Many of you may not be aware of it, but back in 2017, I believe 2018, there was a gentleman who ran, I think it's U-Crops, yes. It's U-Crops in Williamsburg. The gentleman who ran that came to us, and he wanted to put a grocery store on Kickertan Road, pretty much where the Save Lot is. And we tried to work with him to do that. He wound up going and taking it to Brooks Crossing. It was Jim's Market. I think it lasted maybe a year and some change. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but it went away. So it's not like we see a neighborhood and say, let's not give them anything. We are trying, and you will see that. But it costs money, and so here's the situation. Last year, I think assessments went up maybe about 12%. This year, I think they're up about 8%. We can talk about that. But people, when they see their values jump $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, they want relief from that. And because the largest contributors we have to our economy, Centerra, Old Point National Bank, the municipal automobile dealerships, Hampton University doesn't pay taxes. Joint Base Air Force Langley doesn't pay taxes. The VA Medical Center doesn't pay taxes. NASA Langley doesn't pay taxes. So we are dependent upon the taxes that come from your real estate and your personal property taxes, as well as your sales taxes, as well as meals taxes. And during the course of the pandemic, there were very few meals taxes coming in. Hotel lodging taxes, during the pandemic, there was very little of that. And so when you talk about somebody whose assessment may go up $50,000 and sees that additional tax burden, they're coming to us and saying, hey, we want a reduction. And so we can't do all the things we would like to do in our city, but we're trying to do them gradually. We can try and do a bond referendum and say, hey, we want to do a $50 million bond referendum so we can go and do lighting and street repair or curb and gutter or whatever in this section of town. And I would assure you it would be defeated. So what we're trying to do is incrementally do it. And I'm going to call on the city manager to share the perspective to offer. Just a moment, no. We're going to be in order. I've got the city manager here. I've got some more hands, and I'll come back to you. Just a moment.
I just wanted to add for the neighborhood impacted by the North Point development specifically. As we mentioned at the council meetings, the council's committed to taking a good percentage, if not all of the proceeds and net proceeds once the transaction closes and investing them in the neighborhood. They also have the 10-acre site that's reserved. So our intentionality is after we get through budget season and the property does close, then we would engage the neighborhood with the stakeholders appropriate to talk about what you'd like to see happen, because there are choices to be made. And so would you rather the money be spent on a neighborhood park, which had been mentioned before, on drainage improvements, on street resurfacing? What is the highest priority? And we believe the neighborhood should drive that process. Do you want to see the 10 acres developed as a park, or do you prefer to see it as additional buffer? Those are questions we'll be coming to you with. Unfortunately, with the amount of city staff we have being in the middle of the community plan and the fact that the project has not yet closed, we're not in a position to do that till about May timeframe. But our intentionality is absolutely, as we shared at the council meeting, to get with the neighborhood and the stakeholders of the neighborhood and have those conversations.
Can I ask you a quick question? If that property
Excuse me, ma'am, on respect, we're gonna let everybody else go first, and you can write that down, and we'll come back to you. Yes?
I want to preface my question with the fact that I would like to second that gentleman's statement. That group is not the only group in this city that has lost trust in this council. But my question is what are we going to do with our police department to staff it? My daughter's school no longer has a resource officer. When I asked why, I was told, oh, we lost several of our resource officers because they went to other jurisdictions because they pay more. I personally have a problem that we have a school system that pays a teacher with a bachelor's straight out of school $51,000 and a master's $53,000 at the base entry level, and you have an ad on the city channel that says a new police officer only makes $50,000 after he is certified. He comes in lower. Y'all feel we have a safe city. I would like you to spend 4 hours with me one day in my car. I cannot go to the grocery store without walking through the drug dealers in front of the food line. I cannot take my child to McDonald's without the drug dealer soliciting change walking up to the windows. Hampton has a major drug problem and no reflection on Chief Talbot at all, because I've been making this statement for 23 years. Hampton Police Department has never been able to catch a drug dealer and couldn't, even if they set a concession stand in the parking lot, giving out free samples handcuffed to the handle. There is a great deal of drug trafficking in this city. And the drug trafficking, the reason you don't get people to cooperate when there's a shooting is because drug sales were involved and they are more afraid of the person they were dealing with that shot them the first time that they may come back to see them again. I've been here 23 years. It hasn't gotten any better. So I'd like to see the city provide more resources to the police department so that we can hire more policemen, pay them enough that they stay, and work on really getting our city safe. Because your perception may be your reality, but I don't go out after dark anymore. I had second thoughts riding down Interstate 64 because of the number of shootings there. I avoid Mercury Boulevard like the plague, because that's the street you can be riding down in broad daylight and a car pull up beside you and shoot you.
Chief Talbot?
So thank you for your question. The folks who are walking up to your window asking for change are not drug dealers. That's a whole different. Those are folks that are addicted to drugs. It is an urban problem. It's not a Hampton problem. Objectively, the number of people in my tenure, I've been police chief for just about 20 months or so, not too long. But over the past couple of years, there are 0 shootings in which the people involved didn't know each other. 0. Gun violence is a phenomenon that is almost entirely concentrated among people who know each other, and they tend to, and that's not to say they like each other, clearly, but they know each other. Your risk of gun violence is something that is very often disconnected to the fear that you feel when you're out in the neighborhood, just because fear operates that way. Your risk of gun violence is wrapped up in who you hang out with, whether or not you engage in criminal activity, whether or not you are in love with somebody who decides to shoot someone or they themselves are getting shot at. It's deeply tied up in whether or not you engage in criminal behavior yourself. When we investigate shootings, and it's absolutely true that very often we don't solve those shootings. The reason why we don't solve those shootings is I'm sure you can guess. This is not to be disrespectful to any victim, but it is routine. It is common that our victims were engaged in some criminal behavior themselves. So the gunshot, I don't know about you, but if I get shot, I'm not driving myself to the hospital. That's just not, it's not going to happen. And I'm not going to ask a friend for a ride. So it's a clue very often if a gunshot victim drives him or herself to the hospital. The vast majority of the time it's him. We have made great progress in the city. At the end of 2022, and let me just back up a second before I talk about progress. In my business, almost 30 years, it doesn't come in any shades of we've won. It is some version of tragedy. It's either higher or lower. The trajectory is getting better or it's getting worse. You can never ever feel whether the crime rate is getting better or getting worse because your intuition is just not going to be that precise. Some neighborhoods in the city of Hampton feel like they're dangerous, but it has a lot more to do with your habits than the neighborhood that you live in, right? So I promise you that you can't tell me, I do this for a living, ladies. You can't tell me how many people were shot in 2022. I promise you that the number is not one that you're familiar with. I know exactly how many people were shot. I know how many people were shot fatally, because that's my business. There are 137,000 people in this city. Last year, about 100 were shot. That represents about 0.1% of the population. It's not even 100 individuals, really. It's 100 times a person was shot. There are people within that 100 that were shot more than one time. It is an extremely small percentage of the population. So I say that to say not that it's a small problem. It's not a small problem. But if you understand it, you understand that your risk is not random, right? It is deeply, deeply tragic, but it's not random. If you're not in the city of Hampton to buy drugs, if you're not in the city to join a gang and hang out with gang members, if you're not in the city to engage in criminal activity, if you're not shooting anybody, if you drive responsibly and you refuse to be a crazy person behind the wheel, right? In other words, when somebody beeps the horn at you, you don't have to beep back at them. It's not mandatory. You can just keep looking forward and keep moving. If you engage in habits like I'm sure you do, like I to some degree, I'm literally speaking to the choir here, I'm sure. We need to understand gun violence because we can do more to help the people who are involved and are at risk. But for the most part, it's not us. If it were you, I probably would know you. We probably would have conversations. I can give you a little wink, and yeah, we've talked before. It is a deeply, deeply concentrated problem. And it's one that's deeply concentrated. Many of the questions here that talk about the economic opportunities of the city and whether or not you have trust in local government or the council or what have you, deeply tied into the opportunities that people have at one point in their life and whether or not they were victimized. That ultimately results in an extremely small portion of the population that gets involved in gun violence. The mistake that the police make, and that we don't make, frankly, is to treat every young black man as if he is a problem. Well, that's generating more problems than you're solving. The key to being successful is to understand how localized it is, to understand the role that the police can play in pushing some people into criminal behavior by giving them few options. The key is for us to see the people in our lives that are doing things that are life-threatening. If you have 20-somethings, and again, this is like a 15 to 30-year-old problem. The median age of our gun violence victims last year was 26. So again, we think very often that this is like a teenager. It's not a teenager problem. It is certainly not a 50-year-old male problem. It is very persistent. It's about 15 to 30. Vast majority of them are adults. But if we're going to turn it around, we can't treat every person of that demographic as if they're dangerous. We can't treat every neighborhood as if each one has the same risk. Because each neighborhood doesn't have the same risk. In fact, it is almost always a particular house in that neighborhood. Right? It's never even the whole block. It is that house or that intersection that is extremely dangerous for the people who are in that network. So ultimately, there are a number of drivers that will push conditions to gun violence. None of them are random. None of them. The women who are involved in gun violence, we had a triple homicide earlier this year. Again, 29 years, always the same story. Always the same story. If it is a female victim, they are in close proximity to somebody who shoots somebody or who gets shot themselves. Not real tough to figure out almost every single time. It is not, I was hanging out on my front porch, or I was going to the McDonald's, or I was going to the grocery store. I've had none of those in my career. And that's not to say it doesn't happen. It's not to say it doesn't happen. But it is to say it's about as likely to happen as getting struck by lightning. All right, that can happen too. But it is not a likely thing. And the mistake that we make when we are evaluating our city is to think because there is always a story available on the nightly news, that means somebody got shot every night. Well, if you're like me, I say turn off the news because it's just totally depressing most of the time. But if you're going to watch the news, recognize that you are seeing the same loop of crime over and over again. The same loop of crime over and over again. Remember, 137,000 people, 100 times last year, 32 times last year was fatal. So far this year, as the mayor said, 9 times was fatal, including a fatal police shooting that was justified. It's a small number of times, a small number of people. a significant problem in terms of the tragedy, but not significant in terms of the geography. I'll say this, Mayor, and I'll close.
Would you address that?
Yes, sir. The if you added up the geography involved in the city of Hampton, it would be less than 5% of the geography driving a significant portion of the crime. Right? It's a couple of, not a couple. It is a few points, few addresses and intersections and parts of blocks spread in different areas of the city. The rest of us are profoundly safe. Profoundly safe. The issue of gun violence is one that we understand well. We have a lot in place to be as effective as any city. We have an evidence-based approach. We are operating with a manpower deficit, just like every other department, every other urban department in the country, right? Urban department is the key. What's happening is not police officers are leaving for higher paying jobs. Guess what they're leaving for? Actually, lower paying jobs. Vast majority of the cops are leaving for lower paying jobs in slower departments. We're making a shift in this country. I don't know if you all have 20, my wife and I, we have 20 somethings. They're making different choices, different quality of life choices. I've been hardcore for 30 years. I can't imagine doing work where boredom is not coming into my life. I'm in it until I don't know when. I couldn't do anything else. My son wants no part of it. My daughter is interested in a different quality of life. We're finding that in our business, and we're having to make adjustments. Right now, we're about 30, a little bit more than 30 officers short. We are as effective as we've ever been in the Hampton Police Division. We're as effective as we've ever been. We are as focused on the violence. We're out of our cars. We're treating people well. There are some vacancies in the school system that I've authorized a week ago that'll be filled shortly. We get things done rapidly. If you talk to anybody who works in the Hampton Police Division, they will tell you we are serious about our work. We are 100% serious. And we are not sitting around waiting for the next crime to happen. We're moving and doing everything to keep this city safe. And that's what we will continue to do until we push the numbers as low as we possibly can. But we've made significant progress over the last year.
So I'm understanding you to say.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me.
You didn't really answer my question, though.
Sorry. But the way we do it is we go around, and if you still have that same question, we'll bring it back. We're going to give everybody an opportunity. Mr. Rules.
Good evening. My name is William Booth. Okay, I've been living in Hampton over 20 years. During the course of the years, I've never had my road be fixed. They'll put new pavement down, but it's never been done. All through the city being done, but not my block. Why?
We have to take a note of that and find out and get back to you. I don't know where do you live?
I'm in the 500 block of Bond Avenue. Bond.
The city manager's making a note of that.
Never been done over 20 years.
Okay, sir. I think I saw it again. We'll go here.
My name is Thomas Bryant, and I just want to know what cautions have y'all done or doing with the schools safety?
I can't speak to all that. I do know that they have put in, I think in the elementary schools, it's not readily apparent, but there are metal detectors. And they're such that when you go through them, you don't feel like you're being Well, it's not so much that. Here's Congressman Scott's perspective on it. When you put metal detectors and things like that in school, what you're telling the children is we don't trust you. We think that you are here to do something negative. So we recognize that we have to do something. And so what they have, my experience, I was in school last week, so the schools are, I guess, I want to say invasive. You just don't really notice they're there, and it doesn't really stop you. As if in some schools, they used to be about maybe 3 feet wide, and you knew you were going through a metal detector. These are wider apart, and you go through it, and it's more of a sensor. So the idea is that you're not treating kids as if you believe they're criminals, but it's more passive type of detection. Go. You can, yes, because I don't know all of them.
Real quickly, I work with the schools as well as a liaison for the city staff. For those of you, if you have kids or grandkids in the schools, you would know this, but just in case you don't, they do have school security officers at the front desk. You can only go in through the front desk. You have to scan an ID to get an identification badge that tells you where you're going. In addition, our middle schools and high schools all have school resource officers. They're not there necessarily every single day. They do get vacation, they do have sick leave and those kinds of things, but they're there to basically form a relationship with the students, to be proactive and helping them to see the police officers as protectors. They're not there to be law enforcers, although if necessary, they are able to respond promptly. So there's the mix of the hard sort of infrastructure things, the gun detectors. You won't even really realize you're going through a metal detector if you're not knowing what you're looking for. And then the check-in desk with the school security officer, and then the backup of the Hampton police officer.
And I went into Hampton High School about 2 weeks ago. There were 3 officers up front. There were 2 canines, and I also had to go into the security area and show them my ID.
Mr. Mayor, as you're walking, I forgot about the canines. I was just getting up to say that. They do canine checks with all the schools, and the school system has recently added the canine service to the elementary school. They weren't doing the canines there before, but they will be doing them at elementary schools as well.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mayor. I would like to see police presence on Rip Rap Road, my church at Mount Hebron, on the corner of Cross Street. People come off the interstate driving 65 and 70 once they turn left up on the bridge on the Rip Rap. Speed limit is 35, but they are all entailed down the street, so you guys are more than welcome to sit in our parking lot and monitor traffic. Also, Pembroke Avenue on east towards Mercury, from Hampton Roads, Independence Church at North Boxwood. The center lane is made to turn left and right, but you see cars, again, all entailed down the center lane, to get up to Mercury. So I'd just like to see police presence. They hand out the tickets and people swing.
What they typically do, sir, is Public Works goes out and does a speed study, and they try to make a determination of how many vehicles are exceeding, there's a threshold, and they try to determine how many vehicles are exceeding that, and they report to the police whether or not other action is needed. And so I think what we do, city manager is taking notes, and what we can do is probably do a speed study on Rip Rap Road. See, and here, and we'll come back on that. So we'll go here, and then there's a gentleman over that end that's had his hand up for quite some time. Sister Lloyd. Yes, sir.
Hello. As far as speaking about people speeding on the roads, I live Greenbrier and Shell Road. There's been so many accidents there. One in particular where someone did not come to a complete stop, and the other person was speeding down the road. They hit one another, end up going through my yard, hitting my son's SUV so hard that it flipped through the gate into my backyard. And my grandson and my dogs had just went into the house 5 minutes prior to this happening. So, on that intersection, there needs to be, I'm not even sure if a 4-way stop sign would do anything to prevent people, they act like they're on Indian Speedway doing 100 miles an hour, and it makes no sense, but something really needs to be done. As well as sidewalks being put in the neighborhood, so the kids who go to school, they're safe while they're waiting for the bus, instead of somebody flying through here and hit somebody's child, my grandson in particular, you know. So something really needs to be done, Shell Road and Greenbrier in that neighborhood.
And I fully understand that, and what I've said in times past, and also at some of the town halls, is there's increasing lawlessness, not just in our city, but I think throughout our region, where individuals think that speed limits are for the other people. They're not for us. You can see it, certainly on the interstate, you can see it as people are running down Mercury Boulevard and any area where they can get speed and go. But in many instances, particularly in neighborhoods, the people who are doing the speeding are people who live in those neighborhoods. And that's the reality of it. We can, again, try and do more speed enforcement, but I think if you try and do more speed enforcement, then there's a cost there. Because now you're taking away folks who you're talking about the crime and the violence. So there's a balance there, but more folks are just being lawless. That's all I can tell you. There are ways of trying to monitor that better. Some localities and other areas use red light cameras, but when you talk about using red light cameras, speed cameras, then people believe that that's a First Amendment right that you're violating, because you shouldn't just have Big Brother everywhere, that we want you to have a police officer out there that you can negotiate with. But those are trade-offs that have to be made. And back to the sidewalk, as I said earlier, all due respect, we are governed by issues that regard the Chesapeake Bay. And so there's something that the EPA calls, it's called a total maximum daily load, TMDL, and that is a figure calculation of how much runoff can go into the Chesapeake Bay. And if you exceed that, you can get penalized. And so that's why in many instances, developers put sidewalks and things in their developments, but they also have to have a mechanism for taking care of that runoff. And as a city, you probably said, we talked about trying to do block improvements, but it's very unlikely. I mean, it's a 412-year-old city going on 413 years old. And it was not designed like a Virginia Beach where it's a modern city with every neighborhood being laid out so every neighborhood can have sidewalks and curb and gutter. So for the most part, if you live on a city or live on a street that doesn't have sidewalks, it's very unlikely that you'll probably get sidewalks. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Fred Henry. My question is, there is an insurmountable amount of empty buildings in the city. When I ride through the power plant area with a sign with nothing on it, I was in PTC the other day. It was so many empties that I was appalled. Going through the city, buildings that have been standing for 35 years, empty. The gentleman told me, well, they're not a public nuisance. That was what we got from the last meeting, maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago. They're not a public nuisance. So I'm trying to find out, how long does it take to do something about a building that's got gang signs on it, broken glass, before they say it's a nuisance?
We've tried to get an act in the General Assembly, and maybe the city manager can explain that one, but I will offer to you, sir, all due respect. When people start finding it more convenient to shop online than to go to a Peninsula Town Center, then that's what started hastening the demise of brick and mortar stores. Now, that's Peninsula Town Center. I used to have regular conversations with the owner who lives in Texas, and he can come up here and we talk about it. So what he's trying to create there is an experience. And when I say experience, it's something that you won't get online. So you'll find that a number of the stores that are there now are specially type business, with some exceptions, jewelry and some women clothing stores. But the rest are going to be the restaurants or their eateries of some type. And of course, he's building, the latest thing that's being built there is called a latitude climbing center that you will be able to go in and do rock climbing. But for the most part, yes, we are helping to bring about the demise of brick and mortar stores because we found it, particularly during the pandemic, more convenient to shop online. And I'll ask our city manager for comments. Just one sir.
Thank you. So two points on this. First off, a lot of people think the city should have power to do something about vacant buildings. We really don't. If you think about one of our fundamental philosophies as a government in the country, it's private property rights. And so we can't make a private property owner dispose of his property, lease the property the way we want him to, sell the property. I can give countless examples of places. One that we get asked a lot about is Willow Oak Shopping Center. The property owner doesn't want to invest in it, but he also doesn't want to sell it. And he has his reasons for that, his own financial reasons that don't align with our community interests. So we try to influence him, but we can't legally do anything about it. Virginia is what's called a delimitable state, which means we can only do what the state expressly permits us to do. And there are constitutional issues about taking people's private property. That said, one of the things we try to do that the mayor was referencing is get approval from the General Assembly to at least require a registry of vacant buildings so that we knew who to go to try to have some of these positive conversations, but also if there are issues like break-ins or graffiti or things like that, we can quickly get to somebody to deal with it. And we had that bill before the General Assembly this year and it was killed, which means that despite our request, the General Assembly said, no, we can't have that authority. So what we can do is what you were referencing, the code's reference was, the code does allow us, if a building becomes a public nuisance, and by that there's a legal definition, which means it's not safe to be occupied. If, for instance, a roof is caving in, or if a wall is, falling off, or major things like that, we can condemn the building and then take it down and put the expense on the tax bill of the property owner. But it's a pretty high threshold that we have to be able to certify. It's not because we don't like it being vacant or because it's unattractive, it's because it's not safe. And that's all the law we're currently permitted to do with vacant buildings.
Thank you for waiting so patiently.
Hi, I live off of LaSalle Avenue, and I'm concerned about the proposed construction on Kecoughtan, where they're tearing down the woods right next to Audrey Lane. There's supposed to be new development there, very upscale new development. My concern is that if you open up Audrey Lane, which you're planning on doing, the goal right now is that you're going to take private property to put a street through over to LaSalle Avenue. And this is, I assume, is all part of the Kecoughtan corridor. You guys tried this once before, and it got shut down by the neighborhood because you were gonna have an access road from that new development, proposed new development, over to the elementary school. The one house on LaSalle Avenue that was proposed to be taken down, the owner never knew anything about it, and it happened to be the one black-owned home in that area on LaSalle. Now, if you open up Audley Lane, because of the same new development, you're going to, it's interesting that where you want the access road from Audley Lane over to LaSalle is where you have a cluster of at least 5 black-owned homes on LaSalle Avenue, and they happen to be some of the nicer homes on LaSalle, and I live in one of them, and you're taking my neighbor's property to make this road to come through, when you could do a horseshoe in this new development to come back out on Kecoughtan, or have Audley Lane and come back out to Kecoughtan. Why go into the area where you have the black homes to have this?
I'm going to let the city manager explain because I'm not wholly familiar with what you're speaking. I do know that the city bought property on Otley Lane years ago, and we've had individuals look at developing it, but in terms of where the road goes, I don't know to
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I have not seen the recently submitted plans that speak to that particular issue, so I'm going to have to research it. we don't have a current development proposal that has been approved, I think, for that area. We have probably received several suggestions, and we're probably vetting those. I believe that's the Presley Otley property that we're speaking of. So I'll be glad to get your name and number after the meeting if you'll come up to me and follow up with you tomorrow after I talk to our community development department, because I'm not current on it.
Well, let me explain something. With respect to you said what we attempted to do with the master plans. Back in 2005, 2006, the city, with consultants and input from the citizens, developed about 5 or 6 master plans. And the thinking at the time was that Hampton is a city that's landlocked. We're about 95 to 97% fully developed. And the only way that we could grow was through redevelopment. So the city came up with a number of proposals. One from Kickotan, one from North King Street, there was Coliseum Central, there was Downtown Master Plan, there was Phoebus, and I think there was Buckland, so there may have been 6 that was called. But the idea was that we were going to try and jumpstart private development by the city investing in certain projects. Well, the Great Depression, Great Recession, came along, and so those projects came to a halt until roughly 2010, 2011, 2012, they started up again. And so if you look along Kickotan, there have been actually some new developments there. The end is closer toward Newport News, but as far as that whole corridor, no, there's not been the development we're hoping for. We've seen development in Phoebus, that's come along, and that's all private money. We've seen some things in Buckrow, and that's private money. Coliseum Central, again, that's mostly private money. So I think we've done a good job, but we've not been perfect on all that we've done. And I can't tell you about that particular project. The city manager can get your information and get back to you with regard to that. So I think there's a gentleman right here. We'll come back to this lady here and look for more hands over here. Okay, just a minute.
My name is Ernest, and my wife and I just moved down here about 3 weeks ago. We're on Hobson Avenue. We have the big gray house that's right next to the construction. We found out 3 days prior to our closing that they were doing the construction for the light industrial. Okay, so I have a major issue with this. One, there's like 4 trees that are left, 4 or 5 trees that are left there. They're all in a row. So they cleared out the entire forest. We didn't know about that prior to getting the house. Secondly, the vet, and we had an inspection on our home. We did the due diligence to make sure that everything was done properly, just to find out that we have foundation issues. So whoever the developer, whoever the builders are, they didn't support the house right. We had about 4 different companies come out and have a look at the house. So it looks like the same builder is building all these new houses down here, and our house is sinking. So now I'm stuck with $30,000 to $40,000 worth of damage that we have to repair if we want our house to be upstanding. So I think something needs to be done about making sure that the people that are building homes down here aren't just putting up something that looks pretty, that is solid, it's going to keep its foundation, it's not going to sink. Also, our home is shaking. It's shaking from what they're doing with the construction. I'm really mad. What do you do? How do you protect a veteran? I was recruited to this area to be an imaging engineer. I came here, I did my job well. Now I'm retired, and I have a brand new house that I finally worked my butt off to get, and now I'm $30,000 to $40,000 upside down because the foundation's bad, the inspectors are no good, and the houses aren't being built and supported the proper way for sinking properties.
I'll ask our city manager about inspection. I'm not sure if our folks do inspections of homes or not, but I'll find out.
The city does inspection of certain things with a house, but not all things with a house. Again, this goes back to what the state code permits us to do. There's a building code that we inspect too, but there are other things that are not as part of the city's building code inspection. I will be glad to get your name and address. Like I said, at the end of the meeting, come see me, and we will talk further about the inspections that were done by the city and find out in particular. I know you addressed the foundation, but I would want some more specifics, because you probably in the estimate got told what particularly needs to be done, and we can identify whether that's something that would be part of a city inspection or not. Many times when we get these complaints, we don't get them very often, fortunately, but when we do get complaints about quote-unquote shoddy construction, they are not things that are part of the building code. But I'm not a building code expert, so that's why I want to get with you, get the more details, and we'll follow up with you.
Hi, my name is Melissa C. I was the executive director for Miko Skate Park. We were a nonprofit in PTC. So that you talked to the owner of PTC in Texas. He gave us that space for 3 years at a very amazing price, very reduced price. We're a nonprofit, and we were looking to private donors and churches and things like that to keep the park going after COVID. I mean, anybody that goes to church knows that everything is kind of like dwindled down, right? So we closed. My problem now is the park was like a safe haven for our kids. And they're all my kids, right? So my neighbors hate me right now because my house is full of kids constantly. And I love it, I don't care. But our kids need a safe place to go. I am fighting for a better skate park. Hopefully Woodland will be able to rebuild. But in general, I love what the police department has done. I see your presence. I don't know how to say this politically correct, so I'm not going to. My skate park is very diverse, right? We have more black skaters than we do white, just because we reflect the demographics of Hampton. My kids are targeted. My black kids are targeted, I feel personally more so. And I don't know what to do about that, right? So right now our kids don't have a place to go. They don't have a skate park. They don't have a safe place to go on a Friday or Saturday night. So they're in the streets, right? They're skating at Buck Row, which I hate. But our police officers and our, Parks and Rec officer is telling our kids that they're gonna be ticketed, okay? PTC, they've called me directly because I know every single manager there because they call me if my kids do anything bad. But they're not allowed to skate at PTC either. There's nowhere for my kids to go, and there's nowhere for them to be safe. So we have a lot of different problems in the city, and I know that I can't fix everything, but somebody brought up abandoned buildings, and I don't know, I feel like maybe if we come together as a community and do something about it. Can we have an abandoned building? Can we take on that project? Can we make some kind of beautification project and get volunteers in there to transform it, to make it a safe place for all of our kids, you know? And this, again, it doesn't sound politically correct, but a lot of my skaters that come from, say, Yorktown, they don't have these problems. You know, they have places to go, and they, in general, come from a mom and dad family functioning home. Most of my kids, they come from single parent homes, you know, and I feel like those are the kids that are being left behind. And I don't know where the disconnect is coming from, but I feel like Hampton has a huge disconnect. I mean, how can we address gun violence with these ladies if we don't start at our base and at our core, and that's our kids. And our kids should be getting all of the resources that we have available, and there's just none. Our Parks and Rec is a joke. I mean, I've lived in Virginia Beach for 20 years, and I finally came home. I graduated from Kecoughtan. I finally came home to be closer to family, and it's insane. It's unbelievable how the lack of resources our parents have for their children and our children have in general. So is there anything that we can do, or is there anything that we can help with or facilitate, or, I mean, what can we do about this?
You've said a number of different things.
Sorry.
Well, no. I think one of the things we need to understand, first of all, is we have concentrated poverty in Hampton. All right. So when you talk about comparing ourselves to Virginia Beach that has a budget of over $1 billion, our combined school city budget is less than half of talk about abandoned buildings, and that's fine. I mean, I have people approach me saying, hey, I'd like to set up an office in a building. Does the city have? The city doesn't have vacant buildings. Those are privately owned, and so you'd run almost into the same thing at PTC as you would, I guess, with the others, unless you can find somebody, a philanthropist, or as you talked about, you were supported against by churches, make the same appeal. We might be able to provide some assistance, but I don't think the city can provide long-term assistance for what you're trying to do. And you compare ourselves again to York County. I think it was 2 years ago, we had a resident who was writing us and comparing our real estate tax rate to Suffolk. And Suffolk at the time, the value of their homes was over $250,000. That's like the median. And Hampton's not that much. Ours is improving, but it's not there. So you've got more to work with. You can lower your tax rate because you're still making more. Again, we had an increase last year of like 12%, an increase this year about 8%, and yet we've got to reduce our tax rate so that people don't feel that burden. That's an unfortunate aspect of it. But I hear what you're saying. I'd like to find out more about the perspective of that, our parks and recreation is a joke, because again, we are trying to do things. We're trying to create safe spaces for our kids. We're trying to do pop-up recreation in communities where there is no community center. Those are some of the things we're trying to do. But again, you put our city manager and find out more specifically. But I think what you're going to require is probably more of an appeal. If churches were supporting at one point, we may just try and make another appeal to churches to say, hey, we were providing a safe space. You've got some churches that have gymnasiums that are unutilized. Is there something you can do? Can we find some flooring that they can put down to protect the floors so they can do the skating? Now, I don't know, if you could put all that in there, but I think where there's a will, there's a way. But I'm not sure if, as a city right now, we can help you solve the problem. Make over here.
Thank everyone for coming out today. My name is Joan Weaver, 23661, resident expert. My heart goes out to you, and I thank you and your wife for trying to give us a chance. You are what we need to bring this neighborhood up, because for so long we've gotten nothing. Now let us address the pie. Let us address the bigger pie. Let us in 23661 address any pie, because we need SNAP and food stamps in our area. We have nothing. We have been the bottom of the barrel forever, guys. And out of this North Point project pie, thus far, what we have received are environmental and ecological eyesore and devastations to come. I say that because it is with merit. Having been here for this long, 23661 did not get this bad overnight. It was ongoing. Bethel, Willow Oaks, Phoebus, all other areas. Our neighbors, even in the prestigious Old Wythe, right across the street, they don't have the devastations that we have regarding the infrastructure, the highways, needing building and help with repairs. But it appears when you're brown, you better stick around. When you're black, get back. And I don't like to bring it to race, because in my heart and in my feeling, people are people. We all bleed the same. We all have feelings. So out of that North Point project pie, we want to get monies to build our properties back up. That young man and woman to bring in other families like them, to give us a better base to look at. We are a good, hard-working, deserving people in our neighborhood. We don't deserve the crumbs. We deserve not to be the scapegoats of the city. The monies that come from there, give it back to us. And one thing that really knocks my socks off, and I'll share this with you all, do not insult us. 10 acres, that's all out of this North Point project. You didn't care or respect about us when we asked for affordable housing, We ask for opportunities for social and educational purposes, and what hurts more than anything is the slap in the face for our history. I'm up in Richmond, Virginia, my mother's home. The Confederate capital thought more of Virginia State School for the deaf and blind than our own city council, it appears, mayor, and everybody else. The Virginia Museum of History and Culture had a Black History program, and guess what the feature was? Program History of Deaf Schools and Segregations. And what was a dagger to my heart was when Virginia State School for the deaf and blind was brought up, and how they will pave over what you all have with industrial instead of giving you something that represented that education, that life, employment, giving us hope. This is not Detroit, Michigan, or downtown Chicago. Why should we have to look at an eyesore that the city's going to make money of? I ride by there every day, and it hurts my heart to see it. We should be able to see children playing and laughing, mommies and daddies like this young couple bringing promise to the 23661. Opportunities for us to get education and have things, not the quote, and I will say it again, the slice of the North Point, City of Hampton pie, environmental and ecological eyesores and devastations. So I want us all who are within my voice of the 23661, let's make it heard and stay on them like white on rice. You said it, now give it to us. Ride through our neighborhoods, people, and look at all the other communities in the city of Hampton. My Hampton, my father that I serve, you would not see any that are as destitute as ours. And yes, it hurts because I'm here. I've lived here. Hampton High School, Hampton Institute, Hampton University. I know the story and I know it well. I've seen promises made. I've seen promises broken. I've seen those who sit high and look low at city council. At the end of the day, after promises, they go home to their prestigious neighborhoods. And here we are left. But with what? You're going to take us, use us for scapegoats, show me the money. Thank you.
I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which currently right now has the highest home prices in North Carolina. Where I grew up was about 3 to 4 blocks from the heart of downtown Chapel Hill. My house that I grew up in, and my mother, father, my 2 older brothers, my older sister, was a 4-room house. That was about 3 feet off the ground in the back. Had overhead lights for plug-in screw-in. Had a coal stove in my parents' bedroom. We heated our back bedroom by kerosene heater. We were 3 to 4 blocks from the heart of downtown Chapel Hill, and we had dirt streets. Every time my parents and neighbors heard that they were paving streets, they would sign petitions, do what they had to do. They didn't pave those streets until I was 25 and had moved away. When it got below 32 degrees, our pipes froze. We only had actually cold water that came in. Had a toilet, didn't have a bathroom, had a toilet. My best friends, my neighbors we lived at a dead end in the street. There were 11 of them that lived in that house. They had an outdoor faucet and they had an outhouse. Our house was $10 a week, and every Thursday we'd go across town and my parents would put $10 under a planter. So I grew up believing that our folks and our residents, neighbors, were paying for services they weren't getting. So there's a sense of, for me, making the pie bigger. That's why I realized that if I were elected official, I would be able to have a say in how things were provided. Now, we built, that was the first 12 years of my life. As I said earlier, we built the house. It took 2 years to do it. We use recycled lumber. So in other words, my father was a cook at a fraternity house. And there was a gentleman who was an alumnus at fraternity that told my father about different houses that we could tear down. So me, my father, my two older brothers and I, we could tear the houses down. We'd save the lumber. We saved for 2 years, and we bought concrete blocks. My father would hire individuals who were masons, carpenters to come on their days off in the evenings and work on our house. The neighborhood has changed. They paved the streets. Nobody who lives there now were people who lived there when I was growing up. I say all that because there's a sense that maybe because you see me as I am now, you don't know my story. And maybe you feel I can't understand what you're talking about when you say you come from a neighborhood that has lacked resources. I understand that. And that's why one of the things we're trying to do as a council is try and ensure fact, yes, everybody gets a share of the pie. And that's our favorite expression, but the idea is, again, we have a budget, and it's limited. And what we're trying to do as best we can is ensure that we try and live the whole city. We try to put multifamily housing on the school site. We did RFPs, and it generated no interest. So after having that property there, we bought it in December, I think, of 2010 for $2 million from the state. And after having it sat there for like 7 years and wondering what we could do with it, and realizing it was one of the last really developable properties in our region, someone came to us with an idea. And the idea was to try and put businesses there that would employ individuals who had a difficult time with employment. What Greg Garrett wanted to do was what's equivalent to what Homeboy Industries has out in Los Angeles, California. And that's to try again and create a business model that will allow people who may have found employment difficult to be employed there. As I said at the beginning, our three main industries here in this region, our three main businesses, are military or defense industry, it's the port, and it's tourism. We've got the convention center, we've got the Aquaplex, we have Boo Williams, the Coliseum. Those are our drivers as far as tourism. As far as other economic drivers, we don't have very many. We've got Huntington Ingalls to make an investment in the North Center North, or Parkway, Hampton Parkway Center North. They made an investment there. They made an investment there, Huntington Ingalls, with their unmanned systems of excellence. But we don't have people knocking at our door trying to get to do business in Hampton. We've got developers, but the developers are coming primarily offering multifamily or single-family homes, which are priced out of most of the range. We were told today why housing prices are as high as they are and why people who live in apartments are feeling the pressure of rising rents because there's a shortage of single-family homes. And so those people who are trying to get those are bidding up the price of that. And so it puts pressure on rents because, again, the folks who are living in those apartments have really no place to go because they can't afford the single-family home. So they're staying there and the folks are raising the rents. That's the cycle we're caught up in. So we're talking about that port being one of the business ports on the East Coast, and in fact, when the pandemic was happening and ports weren't getting business in on the West Coast, that port was thriving. The opportunity to have a business that supports the port and supports Huntington Ingalls with all that they're getting as far as defense work wasn't so much too good to pass up. But when we look at the other things we tried to put there, you know, if you talk about putting another type of community asset there, a community center, or the city's not going to put a community center there, but we didn't have that many options as far as what to put there. And so I apologize that it's not well received, but if we talk about a city that's 95 to 97% built out, we didn't have a lot of options as far as trying to create revenue without putting more pressure on people who are homeowners and raising the real estate taxes. Now, there's a hand over here.
I have a question with the tax. You said that because they're gonna, I guess, generate tax money for the city, this new development? Did they give some type of incentive to build here, you know, tax rebates or tax incentives to build here? Because you want to bring business here, so that you will reduce the homeowners' taxes.
I'm gonna let the city manager explain that. But typically, one of the things I used to have a problem with before I became a member of council was the fact that a lot of times we provide incentives. So we buy land at this price here, and then we sell it to somebody down here. Sometimes we do it, I think we do less of it. Well, I asked the city manager for his perspective on what we did.
So, I'm sorry, this gentleman was passing me a note, so I don't know if there was a specific one you wanted me to address or just a general.
She wants to know if we provide any incentives to North Point.
Oh, to North Point. No, well, what we're doing with North Point is selling the land. And to the mayor's point, we had to buy land at a set price from the state. That was given to us when we wanted to acquire the property. And then we had to demolish it. And they're paying full market value for the land. But I can't say right now. I have to go back and look at my notes to see if we got compensated 100% of what it cost to buy it and tear it down. But they did pay, they haven't closed yet, but they would be paying full market value. We didn't give a particular incentive to do that. We did extract some promises from them. Two of the major ones that pertain to the neighborhood in particular is that there will be a workforce development center on site that they build, and they will give to the city's EDA or Economic Development Authority to manage, so we can do workforce development training there. This sort of gets to the point earlier about job skills and whatnot. As we can identify the types of skill sets, we would be running trainings in that workforce development center for people so that they could hopefully be ready to take those jobs. And then we also got the commitment that not only would North Point, but their subsequent tenants would be required to post jobs locally for 2 weeks before going to the general public, so that we could prioritize, in effect, Hampton residents, and in particular people who live in this neighborhood. So we got more from them. They also chose, we did not ask for this, but they chose to give a gift of $100,000 to go towards what we ultimately work with the stakeholder group to do around either the 10-acre site and or other neighborhood investments. One thing we're absolutely committed to is making sure that we memorialize the Virginia school history. And so that $100,000 would be part of that memorialization. So they sort of gave us more, frankly, than we gave them. But I have to add up the numbers to be particularly sure about whether we got every dollar back.
It is 8:45. I've been going since 8 o'clock this morning. We talked about going an hour and a half. Now going an hour and 45 minutes. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank certainly again Pastor Kenny and his congregation for opening up Third Baptist for us. I generally do town halls about every 3 months, quarterly. So I would just suggest if you still have things that you want to talk about, you might try and get me before I leave, but I'm probably going to keep you heading to that door. But you can send us an email, and we'll try and respond to your questions through email. Pastor Kenny.
I want to thank you all for coming. Since I am a pastor, and since this is a church, let's pray before we leave. Almighty God, we're so grateful for all that we've heard and shared here tonight, for the hearts and the minds of your people, oh God. We thank you for a concern and a passion for community. And God, we ask you now to give us wisdom, give us direction, give us guidance, and be a bridge to bring community and leadership together, oh God. As we leave this place tonight, let our homes be safer when we get back. Give us traveling grace and mercy, peace and covering, strength and protection. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you all for coming. God bless you.
All right.